Hey, listen, we got some things that we gotta discuss. How we can affect the system and make it better for us. But first, we gotta start with the man in the mirror. Open your third eye and the vision's gonna be much clearer. We are revolutionary. We are visionary. And we stand resolute on those who pollute the minds of many. Revolutionary. We are visionary. And we stand resolute on those who pollute the minds of many, y'all. This is the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast, y'all.
All right. Welcome to the first episode of the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Ace.
And I'm your other host, Alicia.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here with you, Alicia. Although you're my wife and you're with me every day, it's good to be here with you on the podcast. And we have all these deep, long conversations that come up sometimes with these, reasoning sessions where we get into these deep dialogues. And I'm like, well, we should be recording these, right?
Every time. There's so many times in our life where I think if someone was just following us and recording it, I would just love to share it with the world because we have so many great conversations. And so I'm proud of us to start that we're even just sitting here recording, because so many times we've said we're going to, and then something else comes up, and something could have easily come up today, but we did it. We're here, episode 1.
Yep, and for those of you that end up tuning in and listening to this episode, just want you to know that we really appreciate you, because I know there's loads of podcasts out there these days and plenty of things to listen to and all that, so we appreciate you taking the time out of your day or night or whatever, and listen to what we've got to say, and we'll try to be as honest and forthcoming as possible. And I think we have to be open to be making mistakes on this podcast, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because, you have to be able to be willing to learn and grow. And I think that's also a hard thing about today's culture. You get this little snippet of what someone says, but then they could grow. They could have grown from then, or could be in a different context.
Yeah.
But you have to be willing to do it still to put yourself out there, right?
We do. And I think even when we think about us, and a conscious party started so long ago for us, and back then, things were so different, right? So if we looked back and we didn't do a podcast back then, but we did plenty of other stuff, and we'd probably do it better now, but you have to start. And same with this, episode 1. We may look back in 10 years of this podcast and think, do that differently, but you got to start somewhere.
Yeah. Well, that's the first time we've heard our little theme song in a while, and to put it in a little bit into context, or give you a little bit of the storyline, is we're in Girdwood, which we'll talk about in a minute, Girdwood, Alaska right now, but we were living in Fairbanks at the time and in the process of moving, and we had family visiting and all this stuff. And anyways, I was trying to rebrand my other podcast that I do through the University of Alaska called The Critical Social Worker, the Critical Social Work Podcast. And in the process of that, talking to Alicia, we just decided that, hey, the Critical Social Worker is good as it is, and what we need is something different that you and I, that Alicia and I could dive into these deep dialogues and talk about things maybe a little deeper or differently, or different subject matters and whatnot than we would maybe on the podcast through the university, if that makes sense. And just to do something different. Anyways, we didn't make that the theme song. Neither of us were rapping on there or singing.
I wish.
But our friend and brother in Jamaica made it for us. And I wasn't sure what to expect when we asked him for help with it. And it wasn't what I expected at all, but it was, even though it wasn't what I expected or what I initially, imagined in my mind, I really liked it. It was, and oftentimes when I have projects, when I work with people on projects, I'm really picky about it, and I hate it at first. But I didn't feel that way. I actually probably felt better the first time listening to it than I do now, but I still really, really like it.
Every time I hear it, it gets me pumped up. The lyrics in it, just the whole vibe of it, I think it really fits. And we had a little bit of mixed feedback when we asked a few people about it. But that's okay, right? Like, not everybody's going to like what we say, what we do, and that's the point. And we are different to a lot of people. I think that the theme song really represents what this podcast is going to be about. So I love it.
Yeah, I think he really hit the nail on the head with the lyrics. You could say a lot of different things. I mean, it's not saying that it represents everything and all about what revolutionary social work is about. but it definitely, has the right aura and the right spirit about it. Anyways, I hope you like the song, and I'd appreciate it if anybody has any feedback or what you think about it, let us know. And so like I said, we've been all over the place with our lives. We've been, we started in Alaska in Juneau. Well, I've been in Alaska before, obviously, but as a family, we moved to Juneau and stayed there for a couple years out on the way out the road, out of town, in a nice house on the ocean. And then we stayed in a really nice house in the middle of the forest in Fairbanks for a year. Fairbanks was hard for us. It gets really cold. It's dark most of the day in the wintertime. And there was smoke and fires in the summer. And it just really never worked out for us as far as being able to build a community. Or not saying that there weren't good parts of it, because there were. And I do value that area.
Yeah.
And just to give you perspective, if you're not in Alaska, talking about in-state things, Fairbanks is 500 miles north of here, and Juneau is probably 500 miles the other way, like southeast of here. So it's a huge state. But now we're down here in Girdwood, and it's actually a part of Anchorage. Neither of us had ever been here before we moved here.
No.
So it's back to the rain, like Juneau. It's rainy. But it's nice. I think we were starving just for community, and although we haven't built an extensive community here, just being able to get outside and walk around, and it's a resort town. Although neither of us have ever been skiing, or
I've been once, but I was terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never been skiing. Although I'm from Utah, the greatest snow on earth, supposedly. I've never been. It was just something that was kind of out of the reach of who I was, and most of the time that I lived in Utah. So anyways, we're here in a resort town, but we can walk around. There's lots of trails, and there's restaurants, and everybody's been pretty kind to us. And we were homeschooling our two older kids up until now, but they had a nice elementary school here, a small one, so we decided to put them in school. So lots of changes for us. Mm-hmm. And what do you think about it all? How you like the town so far?
I love it. And I think the rain is hard for me a little bit. I grew up in the UK, so I'm no stranger to rain, but I love the sun. When the sun comes out, my energy just rises. So we still get sun here. I think, like you said, being able to walk around has been amazing for our family, and especially for you, right? Because you've always been someone on the move, on your feet, going. And so, like coming here, how has that been for your energy and your well-being?
Yeah, I mean, without anything else, I take up my youngest, Aaliyah, who's 4 years old, and we walk down to the school and pick the kids up every day. And I think it's about 1.5 miles downhill and then 1.5 miles uphill on the way back. And that's not that much, but it's just amazing what being out and about every day on a regular basis, where I felt confined a little bit in Fairbanks.
Yeah.
And just getting out and breathing the fresh air and being on the move. And like you said, it's in my blood for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. I've always been on the move since I was a little kid.
It's part of our family now. I think wherever we've lived, we've noticed things that we love: the sun, we love being outside, and we love being able to walk on our feet. If we don't have to drive somewhere, we want to walk. In Hawaii, we would walk like an hour to get to the beach just because we want to be outside and walk, right, with our wagon. And yeah, we love being outside. Yeah,
for sure. It's been nice. And there's restaurants you could walk to. I'd say that the downside of it is, with being a rainforest, is that everything's real wet. Not saying there's not beautiful, nice sunny days, because there are, more so than Juneau, I think. But the ground is damp and wet, so they have like soccer fields over there, but they're, it's I don't know, what do you say, like spongy.
Yeah.
And so there's no real areas to do stuff like that if you would like to do things like that.
Yeah. We'll see how it changes into the fall.
But on the other hand, I've spent lots of years in Alaska at this point, but I live all the way up on the Arctic Ocean in Barrow, which is now known as Utqiagvik, and then Juneau in southeast, and then Fairbanks in the central. And all those years that I've lived in Alaska, people always ask me about fishing and about, do you do this? Do you do this? Did you see this? I'm like, no, I don't live in that part of Alaska. I think you're confused. I live, especially when I lived in Barrow, it's like 1,500 miles north of here, all the way up on the Arctic Ocean. But everywhere that I've lived, it's not quite the area that they're talking about. And now I feel like right here, we're right on it's called the Turnagain Arm, between Anchorage, the biggest city in Alaska, and then the Kenai Peninsula, you know, where you see so much of the salmon, hear about so much about the salmon fishing and bears and all that stuff. We're right here in the middle of it. So although we're right hugged up against the mountain, you could almost see it kind of behind us. We're like 5 minutes from maybe 2 miles, 3 miles
From where?
from the water.
Yeah.
And the Kenai Peninsula is right out there. Mm-hmm. So we're really in just an absolutely beautiful part of not just Alaska, but of the world. And people come here for their bucket lists and whatnot. So I feel very fortunate to be experienced in this part of Alaska that I'd known a little bit about, but I'd never really experienced too much.
Yeah. I feel fortunate that we've just been able to spend time in so many different parts of Alaska. Every part that we've been in, there's been challenges, but there's been amazing blessings as well being there. So I'm grateful, very grateful. And we're lucky to be able to work from here too. And so that's awesome as well. So I mean, how has it been for you transitioning away from the university in Fairbanks? Now you're working out of Girdwood.
I honestly, it hasn't affected me that much because all of my classes that I teach are online. I did teach a cohort in person in Fairbanks, the rural cohort where we brought folks in from rural Alaska, and I really miss that, and I really miss them and the opportunity to have those in-person talking circles. But honestly, it's led to me being a better instructor so far this year, a better professor, because some perspective is that I mentioned talking circles, right? Well, the best part of my education came through talking circles in Alaska, and then I implemented them into my courses when I was teaching in Hawaii at University of Hawaii and Hawaii Pacific University, and they were so successful beyond what I even hoped or thought they might be, based upon what I perceived and witnessed and what the feedback that I had. And so I started implementing the talking circles into my curriculum officially, and then COVID-19 hit, and I really haven't taught an in-person class besides the cohort again. So it's been now, somebody who's, you could say perhaps that my expertise, that's what I'm researching for my PhD, is dialogic talking circles. Now it's been teaching, either via Zoom or online. And so I used blogs, and I try to create conversation and dialogue through these blog sites with the students, and it worked out really well too. And then another change came when artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, came. The blogs became terrible because a blog needs to be personal. You need to be able to put effort and reflection into it.
Unique.
But then they just became, what was it? Everything was delving into tapestries of wisdom and tapestries of this, and it was they got really bad. Not saying they were all bad; they were just bad. And I get it too, because it's hard being a student. You have lots of stuff to do, and you have this tool right here that you think might be able to save you and get you some points that otherwise you might not. But I think it's a waste of our time to be communicating like that. So now we use this thing called voice threads, or I use voice threads, and you can do all sorts of things with them, but it's very simple for me. I don't do any of the extra stuff or have the students create presentations on them or anything like that. I think a lot of students are overwhelmed with the multiple different kinds of technology that they have to use. And so basically it's like this. I'll create something, and it could be a video. I could share a video. I could create a video. It could be a picture with me talking, whatever it is. And I'll ask them to reflect on it. And it basically the thread goes down, and they can type text. They can use their voice. They can create a video of them talking. They can upload a video. There's lots of different ways, but it just goes down. And I found that, at first, everyone was using text, and I was like, am I going to have to create like a rule that you have to use audio or video for most of these? But actually, some of the other students remarked that as well, and as soon as some students started using video and audio, almost all the rest followed suit. And so we have a really good precedent, and I'm really looking forward to it, because it's like having real conversation and dialogue like in the classroom.
Yeah.
But it's just not in real time, right? But that's kind of cool too, because people could be thoughtful about it in their approach and actually respond to you. It's just not, back and forth like right now. It's kind of like you share something thoughtful, and then I come and check on it later. I respond,
right,
and then you do it, and so on. But I think you get the same, maybe not the exact same result, but in the spirit of it, it's working out great. And just the feedback from the students already, I'm loving it. And it makes me a more active professor, because I'm up there I wake up every morning, and that's the first thing I kind of want to do after I get going, is I want to hear what people had to say and say hello to them. So also they're getting more, the students are getting more from me, like more active participation, and it's enjoyable. And so I really look forward to the feedback from the students and everything, and to see how it plays out. But I feel very positive and hopeful about it.
Yeah. It's so much more authentic too, because you're not, I mean, you could script it, what your response is going to be, but it sounds like, especially when I hear you're talking, you're just talking. And so it's not edited, right? It's just right what you think in the moment and then comes out. And that is positive, like especially the spirit of those talking circles and the dialogue that you create in the classroom. I think this is as close as you're going to get right now.
And you could still use artificial intelligence, right? Somebody could still go and put in type in if I said something on the video, they could type it in, or they could copy a transcript, or they could do whatever, and or copy the assignment guidelines in there, and it could give them a little script to read or whatever. But it's a little harder to make something that ChatGPT said sound okay, or be willing to do it when you have to say it out loud.
Right. If you said that tapestry one.
Yeah, and even if you did, you would probably, you're entering it into your brain, and you're going to be thinking about it, or even if you have to translate it into your own words, that's a little bit of learning. And even though it's a little bit of shortcut, it might still, like I said, result in a little bit of moving the needle a little bit further in how you understand the subject.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I can already feel your energy with these classes is different, because you're just engaging in more dialogue every day. I tried to sleep in this holiday weekend, and you decided to be awake doing voice threads in the morning. So, which is great. It's great now, but when you're lying in bed and you're like, I just want to sleep.
Yeah, and the truth is, it's like going back. Although it's different, it's taking me back to my roots. Like when my students were taking me out to dinner and buying me plaques and saying thank you and stuff like that. That was because, I'm not saying I haven't had any people saying thank you or anything, or haven't made any difference in recent years. But I just couldn't figure out how to quite get back to where I was at pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And I think this has kind of brought out the best in the kind of teacher that I am, and being able to respond throughout each day. And
your energy is kind of like sporadic as well. So instead of, okay, Christian, you have to sit for 8 hours and respond, do all these blogs. It's you hear it, you answer, you go do something else. You hear it, you answer. That's very much more your energy. So it fits well.
One of the things I've had to be critical about myself on is sometimes, like say I was to listen to a cool voice thread or watch a cool voice thread video or whatever, and I think, I need to think on that and I'll respond later. But then it gets out of my mind.
Yeah.
So I'm literally the absent-minded professor in that regard. And so then I could forget about it. And so my point is I've been very critical on myself, and trying to hold myself accountable to, if I'm not going to respond right now, I hit pause and leave it on the computer so that I don't forget about it. And so I don't listen to, if I'm not responding now, I'm not responding ever, if that makes sense. I'm going to respond. If I am going to respond, it's going to be now in the moment when the first time that I listen to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, enough about me. You're, you and Juno, Alicia was working as a therapist for the Southeast Regional Health Corporation?
Southeast Alaska Regional Health Consortium.
All right. So you were working as a therapist there, and when we left Juno, you started doing therapy over what do you say it? How would you say it? Digitally?
Telehealth.
Telehealth.
Yeah.
Telehealth, even though it's on the computer, it's still telehealth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, did you start like your expanded roles before you left Juno or after? I can't remember.
I mean, it was coming, but no, it was after. Yeah. So it kind of expanded from clinician and then taking on a little bit more.
So what are you doing right now? So you're obviously a licensed clinical social worker, an LCSW. But so what are you doing on that level, and then what else are you doing in addition to that?
Yeah, so LCSW, so I still do therapy with a smaller number of clients now, and then I'm in a clinical lead role, so I mentor, help, support the other clinicians that are at Search. And the cool thing about Search is because we have across the consortium, so it's all of Southeast, so it's not just Juno. I can help people in other areas. So I'm doing therapy via phone or via video. I'm doing kind of group supervision, group case consult groups. What else do? I love, my favorite thing on a Monday morning is I lead the team with some mindfulness, breathwork, practices like that. So doing a little bit of all of that. And then I do have a couple of people outside of Search who I am supporting with their clinical supervision. They're working towards the LCSW. So I really enjoy the role I'm in now, because I never want to not do therapy, but I do find it, as I'm sure a lot of people listening find it hard to do back-to-back therapy all day, every day. So mixing it up with a little bit more kind of consulting, supervisory roles is perfect for me. I love it.
I just wanted to point out too, when you say that you're how'd you say it? You're assisting folks with their supervision for
the LCSW.
For the LCSW. Well, the first person that she was doing that with is a former student of mine at Hawaii Pacific University, and I just think it's a really good example of how reciprocity can really benefit us as social workers if we create these communities, you know?
Yeah.
And then I think your other person came from him as well, right?
Mm-hmm. And they are actually both working in the position I was working in Hawaii. So yeah, we're all very connected. And I think that's how, I just like how organic that has happened. And I think that will continue happening in our lives, where we are trying to build community in that way, and just connections with each other, where we support each other. And when one of us is able to then supervise, it's just natural to be able to help bring other people up to that level as well. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, what's your favorite thing about being a clinical therapist, or what's your favorite thing? And if you could just do one thing all day, what would that be?
If I could do one thing, what I would love to be able to do is just yoga therapy all day, every day. And so incorporating yoga, movement, and philosophies with clinical practices. So working on it for like anxiety, depression, that sort of thing. If I could do that all day, it'd be great.
What does that mean, yoga therapy? I think people have imagination, and it's going to go different directions when you think about it that way.
It is different for everybody. So an example that I do some now is just being able to chat with someone, and we're just chatting at first, right? And then we're like, oh, just feel so stressed. And I'm like, oh, is there tension? Where's the tension in your body? And if someone notices a lot of tension in their shoulders, then we'll move into some more movement practice and what people would typically think of as yoga, like yoga asana, the movement. We might do some flows, warm up, do some vinyasa flow is my favorite flow. So it's very like moving with your breath. And then we may come down, do a little bit more breath work. I'll try and see how is that stress tension in their body. Usually it's decreased quite a lot. We'll talk about other things that they could do outside of our sessions like that. So that's how I use yoga therapy. It's different for everybody, but just noticing, because we carry things in our bodies, in our minds. And so we can use yoga asana, but also pranayama and the whole 8 limbs of yoga. We can use that to be able to move those things through our body. And so that's why it helps with anxiety, depression, and trauma is the 3 big things I would use yoga therapy for. So.
You know, when I think about that, I always try to use self-application to myself, and think about how I would receive something, or how I would think about something if I were in a position of receiving that. And I think, I don't want to think about myself now, but I want to think about myself, when I went to rehab 20 years ago or something like that. I want to think of that version of Ace. And I think that it would have been so esoteric, meaning so out of my realm of understanding. And mind you, this would be before, we've come a long ways in the information that's available to us with just even, books being published, but the internet and everything like that, the information that's accessible to us regarding these subjects. But I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. And there's a lot of people, for most people, it is esoteric. But I think there's a way to do it, because we all have a body of some sort, right? And so if you can help someone see that, connect that they're feeling stressed, and then notice like, oh, like my shoulders are up here, and you just have them like just release them down, then you're in. Like you've already caught someone's attention that, okay, something's connected. So I've worked with people where I would think they are not gonna want to do this at all. And humor, right, is to bring that into the room as well and be like, just humor me, just try it. Especially with breath work, I'll always start with just make your exhale really long. With kids, it can be like, imagine you're blowing in a balloon, make that exhale really long. So when you get people understanding that those little things, then you can build on it. So sometimes yoga therapy can happen very small at first, and you're just doing something for like 2 minutes. But then once you've started seeing someone for like 5 weeks, let's say, you start doing a lot more at that 5 week mark. So.
And how do you get somebody, I shouldn't say how do you get somebody, how do you help somebody that is unable to make the connection, never has made any of these connections, like you mentioned, the connection of mind-body, for example. Most people, I shouldn't say most people, but there's plenty of people out there in the world, myself, my past self included, that would have never even considered that they could have, maybe a little bit, but never really taken the idea seriously. And, how do you get that? How do you, just to push you a little further on that, how do you, how do you break that barrier? Because I think, you could say like, riding a bike, the first time, it could be when you're a kid, right? It seems so like it could be so hard and dangerous, but then the first time you do it, that's what I said, the first time it's like riding a bike. But I also think it's kind of like that when you can make that first little connection, when you open that window, that door, and somebody sees or feels that connection and they're like, oh, why didn't I ever recognize that before? Why didn't I, like I would say this, like for me, I feel irritable and impatient with things. And then if I would have thought about what I had eaten that day, I would realize that the food that I put into my body earlier that day wasn't giving me what I needed, and actually was probably detrimental to how my mind was had a negative impact on the way that my mind was able to function. And I mean that literally. But I would have never made that connection back then at all. I would have never said to myself, it's that simple. You could revolutionize my mind just by putting this down and picking this up and eating this instead.
But it's a process, because there's other things that have happened before that, it's step by step. So I would say, as we know in social work, start where the person is that you're working with. And so for some people that do have some awareness with their body, then I would start more there. But some people that maybe think more scientifically, I would start there. I would go to the nervous system. I would pull up all kind of diagrams, and some people are really interested in that part and need to know the why before we do the practice, but some people are the other way around. So it's just knowing who you're working with as well. But then also, once you get to the point where you can practice, is practice together. Do those kind of easier ones, like the extended exhale. I always use that as an example because it's just easy. We can all do it. And then what I've also noticed is I will then have people that would talk in session, and they'll get kind of elevated. I can see their heart rate's probably going higher, the blood pressure's going higher. And then I'll see them do an extended exhale. And so every time I see it, I'm like, oh, you just did it. How did that feel? And so it's just like building on that, building and building, one step at a time. And like you've got to the point where you now notice your food and how that impacts your mind and your body. But before that came so many other different steps. And it's just being patient with ourselves, right? We just have to keep putting those steps in front of each other. It's going to go up and down. I like to say that rather than like going backwards and forwards, right? It's going to go up and down. But if we just keep moving forward, we'll get there in the end. It's a lifelong process though, right?
I don't know why, but you just evoked a couple of memories in me where I've interviewed or had dialogue with different therapists on the Critical Social Work podcast. And they have, in the process of talking about, clinical practice, they've talked to me, or like breath work and things like that. They've been just like you, Christian, just like you, just like you're practicing right now. And I'm like, oh, I'm doing it. But I think that's the thing. Going back to things that are so simple that can seem so esoteric before you broach that gap or
like make that connection.
Yeah, make that connection. Breath. I remember we had a guy when I was in rehab, and I don't know what year it was, 20 plus years ago. And this guy came in and he talked to us, I think, about yoga and breath work, but I can't remember for sure because I didn't really know what those things were back then. And I thought it was weird. And I just didn't even take him really too seriously. But I think maybe if I had him one-to-one and he could have talked to me in this situation like that, it could have been better. But little did I know, I wish I would have taken it seriously back then, because later in life I've learned that, it's hard to like really rank things, but probably the number one tool I have in life is being aware of my breathing. Literally all the times, I could think of all the times I get angry at someone and I say something or do this, if I look at that situation, I am literally not breathing, or it's really shallow. And if I'm able to like just come back to the breath, I mean, and there's so many different, you got to contextualize it so many different ways, because it could be like you're stressed and you take a breath, or it could just be like, you know, when you wake up and you're able to like fill your air up, or your lungs up with air and start that day. It could be, you know, knowing and practicing specific breath work, but it could also be just once you learn about breathing and you become aware of it, then it's like it becomes a part of your, you know, your natural homeostasis. And when you return to that, you breathe like you've taught yourself to breathe versus how you would have in your old fight or flight situations. Not always, but I mean, you slowly get there. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And that's why it's important to have, if you're going to use breath work, which I mean, it's just such a powerful tool, like you say, to have a consistent practice where you are intentionally doing it, then your body gets used to it. Like your nervous system then learns automatically, okay, my heart rate's going up. This is what I do. And not just automatically will want to reach that homeostasis, like you said. So, yeah. But one thing that came up in my mind, do you think that the person that came in when you were in rehab, he planted that seed? Because who knows if he hadn't, I know it was esoteric at the time, but it just seems to me that he planted the seed and it grew from there. And in your mind, it came to fruition much later, but.
Yeah, well, would say this, that if there was a seed that he planted, it lied dormant and was not germinated until much, because you're talking about it over.
Is it a long time?
Well, let me think. So about 10 years, maybe a little bit longer, but about 10 years or so, a decade. And I really didn't think about that at all. It wasn't on my radar.
Really? At
all. And I can't remember what pushed me over the line to try it, but I was up in Barrow, up on the Arctic Ocean, and working at the college up there, and I was the student wellness coordinator, and part of the job was to create recreational programs. Well, we have, as you can imagine, in a small town up in the Arctic, you know, thousands of miles from any other city or anything like that. You don't have many resources, and so we tried. Do you remember Beachbody?
Oh yeah.
Beachbody. We did P90X. We did Insanity. Yeah, I remember I had everyone's calves on fire from Insanity. But then wanted to try something different, and so we got yoga. And
how did you find that?
I don't remember exactly. I think I was trying to research some different things and was curious about it, and we did it, and it really changed my whole body over the years. I guess it's been 10 years now since, and I've never done it extendedly every day it's always been in spurts, but it really changed my body. I used to not be able to sleep, and I'd be stiff and my back would be sore, and never at all anymore. That's completely left.
You couldn't sit down, like cross-legged?
No, and I still just have some struggle with, you know, like double-seated pigeon pose or some things with the hips. It's still always going to be tight to some degree, but because I just have a wide frame as well. But it totally transformed me. You know, even if you just looked at me sleeping back in the day and you looked at me sleeping now, you'd see me now, like, you know, being able to kind of curl up a little bit. And back then I couldn't.
Yeah, it transforms your body and your mind. So
it's hard to get somebody to know that it's that simple. And I guess it's not that simple, because yoga's freaking hard. You know, if you're doing power yoga, the stuff that, I mean, there's lots of different kinds of yoga, but if you're talking about stuff that's going to get you in fit power yoga, it's no joke. It's hard stuff.
It is. And when you talk about the 8 limbs of yoga, which I always go back to, because it's so much more than just the movement, right? That's even harder, because that's a commitment to yourself, like on all levels, right? Not just your physical body, mental, spiritual, emotional. So.
Well, we're getting on about 30 minutes here. I think we were shooting for about an hour. We've got, as you know, the theme of our family lives is we have been on the move, and so we don't always have a lot of assistance with children or whatnot. And so basically their babysitter, when we do a podcast, is going to be a movie. And, you know, as with all conscious parents, we may not be super strict on screen time. We want to be very aware of it, and especially if we don't want the movie to end. And so I thought we could transition here, and I thought maybe we could talk about revolutionary social work and the circle of self, but I wanted to give you the choice on which one you wanted to delve into first.
Let's talk about revolutionary social work first, because I think the circle of self will naturally come out of that.
Okay.
So yeah, if you can give us a little background on it, because you articulate it so well.
Yeah, well, and I think I'll read the working definition, a long definition that we have going on. But I think the idea of revolutionary art, this version, I mean, I don't want to say that we own or I own the term or the phrase revolutionary social work. But this version of it kind of came about from me. You know, I became aware of things like critical theory, critical social work, meaning, you know, you're kind of challenging the system and realizing that there's inequalities and that, you know, there's oppression through systems. And we don't have time to get into all of that right now. But essentially, you know, you would want to work to decolonize the system. You would want to change it to make it more equitable for everyone, to work better for us. But revolutionary social work goes deeper in a different way, and it asks us to look at ourselves first. And by that I mean, just an example, I'll just give you like another caricature of an idea. I had a guy that I went to grad school with in Hawaii, at University of Hawaii at Manoa. And I heard what he said in class about certain things. We talked about indigenous. It was one of the classes that we had was history of education, and we were talking about indigenous folks in America and boarding schools and stuff. And so, and then things with try to use these different terms, not black people, but the folks that were more melanated that came from slavery in Alaska. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but what we would say is black folks that came from slavery, African Americans. And I heard what he had to say about those things and minimizing certain things. And I knew that he didn't, I know all of us don't understand these issues completely, but I knew that he hadn't really put in the work and he wasn't there yet. But then I, you know, would see him marching in Black Lives Matter protest in town in Honolulu. And I don't want to criticize anything overall or even criticize that decision for him to support that. I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying is that I think we can make a much bigger difference by revolutionizing our own minds, our own hearts, our own souls, our own practices, everything about us, the way that we think, the way that we perceive the world. Revolutionizing that will lead to larger and greater, better, more profound, more transformative change, not only within ourselves, but in the world around us, than marching in the protests. And I don't want to diminish people's protests. I don't even want to get into that right now. But what I'm saying is that I think where we can make the idea of revolutionary social work is that where we can make the biggest difference is within ourselves. And if we revolutionize ourselves as human beings, and then you can say as social workers, we are going to, I don't want to sound like Marianne Williamson, but we're going to liberate others to do the same, basically.
Yeah.
And we're going to instill those values in our children. And maybe they don't grow up to be professional social workers. Maybe they do. But even then, I think that growing up in our family, they're most likely to be doing some kind of social work.
The spirit of it. Yeah. And this revolutionizing ourselves, I believe it not only will transform us as social workers, but the field of social work, and then just trickling down to the people we work with. Yeah.
And just to talk about revolutionary social work a little bit more, I'll read our definition in a minute and we'll talk about it. But revolutionary social work, if you Google it right now, you mostly get me. So in the United States of America, I'm mostly the person that uses the term revolutionary social work and is toying with it. And it's basically my baby at this point, I think, as far as social work goes. It is the term is used internationally. There's a nice little book full of essays, papers called Revolutionary Social Work. Check that out. I don't know if I have it somewhere.
Somewhere. Is that based in Australia?
It's international. No, the main author is from, I want to say Sweden, but I could be wrong. But they're all international. I've talked to several folks from there. It's got Paul Michael Garrett from Scotland on there. Or is he? It's Ireland, right? There's some other people on there. There's a lot of folks from Australia. There's some people from New Zealand in there. Anyways, besides the point, what I see internationally when they say revolutionary social work, how I told you kind of a little bit about how we view it. Theirs, I think, where it differs from the way that we see it is it can go more towards the side of you're trying to create revolution in society. I'm not saying our version isn't trying to do that, but it's trying to do it through
it starts
inwards, right? I'm not just going to say like using my power as a professor. Not saying I don't use my power in any way, shape, or form like that, but I don't think that revolutionary social work is about using my power to come in just because I have a degree and they hired me as a professor, thinking that I know best and know more than everybody else. It's knowing and understanding that although I may know a lot of things, I really don't know much at all in the big scheme of things about anything at all. I've had some education, but the world is huge. The United States is huge. Each state has lots and lots of people in them, lots of diverse people. I know very little about everything, and that's the revolutionary social worker knows that, right? And they're always striving to know more and to learn more, and always continuously reflecting. And by doing that, they're going to put them in a position to better affect those around them, to better respond to the situation, to the folks that need your help.
Yep, exactly.
Well, and that it's a good segue to talk about the circle of self. But let's talk about this definition first.
Yeah, let's read that.
All right, we'll just go through it real quick. So, revolutionary social work represents a transformative approach within social work that extends beyond the boundaries of critical and radical social work. While sharing similarities with these fields, particularly in challenging systemic inequalities and seeking social change, revolutionary social work uniquely emphasizes profound self-reflection and personal transformation. This approach involves not just critiquing and understanding social problems or advocating for systemic change, but also demands a deep and ongoing examination and revolutionizing of the practitioner's own thoughts, feelings, worldview, and politics. It posits that meaningful societal transformation begins with the self, that to revolutionize social work and society effectively, practitioners must first revolutionize themselves. This introspective journey is continuous, fostering a dynamic evolution of personal beliefs and professional practices in response to changing social realities. It encourages social workers to challenge their own assumptions and biases, thereby ensuring their actions and interventions are not only innovative, but also genuinely responsive to the diverse and evolving needs of the communities and people that they serve. In essence, revolutionary social work is characterized by its dual focus. On one hand, it's the relentless pursuit of systemic change, coupled with a commitment to personal and professional self-evolution, embodying the belief that internal change is a prerequisite for an external impact. Revolutionary social work posits that true revolution begins from within. And I think just the end of that, like I said, it epitomizes it very well.
Yeah.
So that's it. The true revolution begins from within. And when I listen to folks that I deem as revolutionaries throughout history, we talk about those deeper in another time, but that's what I hear them saying too.
Yeah. And I think a key part of that as well is, I can't remember how we said it in there, but it's we're constantly evolving ourselves, right? And the world is constantly evolving too. So this isn't a linear process where you then become a revolutionary social worker. It's constantly allowing yourself to revolutionize and evolve and change your opinions, be flexible, adapt, learn new perspectives. That's a key part of revolutionary social work that we all should be focusing on.
Yeah, and we were talking about things that potentially that definition is missing. And if you're listening or watching this and you have any ideas or want to contribute in any way, we'd love to talk to you or hear what your thoughts are on it. We were just chatting briefly before the podcast about, what the definition is missing. Because like I said, it's evolving. It's definitely malleable and an evolving document. But I think it's missing something about kinship. And I say that because we've become I know that we've always had division in the world and in the United States of America, but division seems to be ramped up in recent years. And it's evolving and changing as well. And there's conversations of anti-racism. There's all sorts of stuff going on. We don't have time to dive into all of that stuff. But what I would say is that regarding differences and division and, even when you're categorizing folks by races or this or that, it's too complicated for us to break it all down right now. But I think revolutionary social work would value kinship, and it would look
Yeah.
at the similarities that we have and how we can come together while valuing our differences in culture and whatnot, and being open to sharing. And you know, and I think, you know, I meant to ask you this, to take this back just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about, you know, introducing yoga to folks. You're talking about yoga and yoga therapy, right? Well, where does yoga originate from? I know there's some little discrepancies, but
Yeah.
essentially, where's it?
I mean, there are a lot of different discrepancies. You can originate it to more India, or Africa.
India or
Yeah.
Africa? I think you could even either one or both if you used either of those. Well, I think you know, you have roots in Africa, but you've never been there, and you're not directly connected to any culture, and definitely not India, and I'm to neither, right?
Right.
Well, I think this is an important conversation to have in the context of the times right now, because we kind of believe in sharing things and whatnot, and not everybody believes in that the same way.
Right.
When we were in Hawaii, and I was teaching at Hawaii Pacific University, I used to have these, for one class each semester, we would have class at the beach, and we would invite other people either affiliated or interested in social work or the same type of things, and we would have these talking circles and kind of these transformative things. It was really meaningful for the students and everything. But one of the years we did it, we created an event on Facebook to try to round up other social workers to participate in the talking circles. And in the description, it said that we would be talking about yoga and meditation, I believe, amongst other things. So topics of a talking circle, you know, just for us to talk about. And there was a woman that chastised me for a long time, like with several messages and several comments about how I had no right to be teaching people about yoga and what that as a white guy in Hawaii and all of these things. And, you know, I try not to like engage in such things where there's going to be a conflict like that. But I mean, it just couldn't have been further from the truth. Like, I wasn't trying to teach anything, and the groups were led all by students of color, for example. But I think my point here is that we get, in today's world, I think we have things that are important ideas and concepts, but sometimes they get taken too far or without any context, and we are just attacking our brothers and sisters when we should be talking about yoga in the talking circle with each other and coming closer together, if that makes sense.
Total sense. Division is such a barrier for the world now. I mean, it has been for a long time, but it's such a barrier, and it's we construct it ourselves. Like, we've socially constructed all of these divisions in the world, in America, in our lives, and it's madness, in my opinion. And I think we don't realize also how much division is used by other people who may not have the best intentions to keep those people in power and keep us divided and fighting among each other, and not realizing the greater issues at hand. We just don't realize it. And so division is something that I feel really passionate about, that we need to break down those walls, and we need, in kinship, I think that has to be a big part of revolutionary social work. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
I think another experience that epitomizes is we had a mutual friend going back to Honolulu, Hawaii again, and it wasn't directed at us or anything like that, but it was directed towards another white person that, like, kind of chastising. They were making fun of them, saying that Bob Marley's not for you. And I'm not saying Bob Marley didn't sing or think or proselytize or talk about issues related to what he perceived as black people, or Africans, I guess would be a better term from his regard. But if you're saying that Bob Marley is not for everybody, then you haven't truly listened to what he had to say, or his music, or Rastafari. Rastafari comes from Ras Tafari, aka Emperor Haile Selassie of Ethiopia, and the whole entire value system is based off of him. And he would have said quite the opposite, actually, as far as you know, he has a speech that he gave to the the League of Nations when Mussolini had invaded Ethiopia. That's very similar and as profound as the Martin Luther King. And I always get them mixed up. I don't mix them up. I put them together. But you know, you listen to the song "War" by Bob Marley, and the lyrics are in there. But anyways, just my point that I believe in coming together, and I'm not saying there's no differences and there's no you know, I think culture is a huge factor or whatnot. But I'm tired of organizing and categorizing and grouping people by the color of their skin and whatnot, because even in the context of our family and whatnot, you know, you're, if we use these words, these terms, you know, you would be considered biracial and having multiple cultures. I have, even though it's European, if you look at my ancestry, it comes from multiple cultures of vastly different types of backgrounds. We're all very different. We're all very much the same. And I believe revolutionary social work would be building a community that groups us together based on our collective values and our character versus something that, like the color of your skin or the color of your eyes or whatever, anything like that.
Yep.
And we make that mistake constantly in society and how we perceive to value others. Yep,
we do. And if we can break down those barriers and those walls, the field of social work will thrive, and the people we work with will thrive too if we stay away from those divisive barriers that we keep putting on ourselves.
So that's just a little, I said we were going to delve into it, but we more like took a little dip. We dipped our toes in revolutionary social work a little bit.
Yeah.
But like I said, it's an ever-changing, evolving, malleable idea. And I would love to hear your thoughts, and I would love to organize with you and talk to you about it and make this revolutionary social work something that we can help each other transform ourselves and transform each other and create, I don't know, I hate to use the term, but like a magical type of community.
Yeah.
That's different than what you see. I think we're so bound oftentimes by the way that things were done and the way systems have been done in the past. I don't know exactly what it is, but I know that if revolutionary social work is to ever really succeed on a large scale, it would be because we figured out a way to communicate and organize community differently than we have before.
Yep.
So if your imagination is going, then let us know your thoughts. There's a couple more things we wanted to talk about. The most important of those being the circle of self. And that's another idea that's has some similarities with what other folks have done or have thought about. And that's good, but it has a unique approach. Tell us about it.
Yeah. And the reason it's kind of connected with revolutionary social work is because this is something that I have started to formulate that is how we can do that self-reflection and that be introspective and work on ourselves. So it comes from two main areas, one being just my own self-work, trying to optimize my holistic health over the years. So things that I've noticed when I focus on certain areas of my life, I thrive. And so part of it comes from that, but also from the work I do in the different areas I've been in, whether it's been medical social work, community social work, private practice, things like that. I've noticed there's also things that I touch on. And when people I work with do those things and follow that path, their lives also thrive. So just a bit of background there. So for me, the circle of self, it's all about wholeness. It's about creating a whole circle of self for ourselves. And there's 7 elements to that. So they are movement, stillness, community, love, nature, nourishment, and spiritual wellness. And so just breaking it down a little bit, I'm not going to go into it too much, but movement is typically what we would think of as moving our bodies, but also moving our mind, moving our thoughts, because in order to process emotions, if you think of the word emotion, it literally has motion in it. We have to move those emotions through ourselves. So I think mind, body, spirit practices are the ultimate thing you could do. So for example, yoga, but any type of movement that you do, whether it's swimming, running, gymnastics, weightlifting, boxing, whatever you do, moving your bodies, and then also practices like journaling, moving your thoughts and your mind. That's a key part. So movement. Then the yin to that yang is stillness. And that is typical stillness is in like rest and sleep, but also in like meditation, mindfulness practices, because we need to have that yin to our yang. We can't just constantly be on the move. So that's stillness. And then love. Love, it's very similar to this. We have to start with self-love, which can be the hardest love to find. But once we find that and we have abundance of that, then we can spread it out. So that's love. Community, we're social beings. We need to be socially connected to each other. Like you're saying, kinship, that connection is really key to our health and well-being. What else have we got? Nourishment. So that not only our food and hydration, but also what are we listening to? What are we watching? How much are we involved in social media? Those sort of things. And in terms of food and hydration, not anything specific of like a diet or anything, but being mindful of, to tell anybody anything, of stop drinking soda, drink water, try and drink as food as close to its original state as you can. Try and limit processed high sugar foods, things like that. Like you said before, being able to connect the food that you're eating with how you're feeling and thinking is key. So,
I was just going to add too, though, you hear we've both heard, right? Lots of people complaining, myself in the past, about being hard to drink water. Now I love water now, but hard, you hear lots of people, I just can't do it, hear it over and over and over again. Well, eat some fruit then, I know health practitioners that say that they don't even drink any water. They only eat fruit and get some stuff from some hydration from a coconut, things like that. So find ways to hydrate. If you can't drink water, well, you should be able to, and you will eventually. But go the fruit option or something like that. Eat lots of fruit.
Yeah, things with high sugar, high water content. Sorry, watermelon, cucumber, all of those things. So, yeah, it's so important. Once you start noticing how much processed food and like the seed oils and things that our bodies don't need, and you notice how much that we're eating of it, and then you change the clarity in your mind, the way your body feels, it's a really important component. So that is nourishment. Nature also, being outside, as we've said, we've noticed as a family, being outside is really important for us. But we are, especially if you're working in office jobs or inside a clinic or just inside, you may just get up in the morning, drive to work, be in the office, drive home, be in your house, and you're not getting outside. So just taking those daily walks, going to eat under a tree, going to hug a tree, anything like putting your bare feet on the ground, those sort of things, really important. And another part of nature is also being connected to the natural rhythms of nature, because we also forget this. We are a part of nature, and so we need to be more aligned with the natural world. So if you think about, like, we go through the whole year, especially in a capitalist society, we go through the whole year trying to do the same thing, like working at the same pace, trying to do our routine the same way. And then you stop and you look at the animals around us, the trees, they change through the seasons, they change through the day. And we don't do that often. So we have to start living cyclically with the natural rhythms of, whether it be your menstrual cycle as a female, the seasons, just the circadian rhythm of the day. Just being more in touch with that is important. And I think the only other one I didn't delve into was spiritual wellness. And this one is not related to any specific religion or spiritual tradition or practice. It is more a connection to a higher consciousness or a universal energy that we have around us, no matter what kind of practice you're involved in. If we can connect to that, we find more meaning, more purpose, and it really helps our well-being, our holistic well-being. So they're the 7 elements. I'm writing a book for the Circle of Self, and it will go deeper, much deeper into those things, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more on this podcast. But this is what I use for my life. I'm really focusing on those 7 elements, and I bring it in with the people I work with as well. And Ace has to listen to me talk about it all the time, so I bring it into his life too. Mm-hmm. And just on that, I call Christian a lot, and so if you hear me mess up, I was always introduced to Christian as Christian, but a lot of people call him Ace.
For the purpose of this podcast, I'm Ace. So Christian is not here. He's watching the kids or working or something. Anyways. All right. Well, we should wrap things up soon. There was something a little bit more controversial, or like, I don't know, controversial may not be the word, but a little more divisive that I want to talk about. And that would be the NASW, the National Association of Social Workers, not in general, we can talk about work they do in other ways, but their social media presence and beyond that, what they're posting about. On one hand, which we won't get into too much, it irritates me, like the celebrity culture, and we talked about how the Ludacris was built up because he had said something about how he wanted to throw it out to social workers or whatever. And that's cool. I appreciate that Ludacris took his time out to do that. But I mean, if you listen to Ludacris's lyrics, they're the opposite of what we should be, especially as revolutionary social workers. They're the opposite of what we should be talking about. And, why do we build up Ludacris and then tear down Donald Trump, for example? And I realize there's different contexts or whatever, and I'm not saying you shouldn't criticize Trump for whatever, but why are you criticizing Trump when for talking about grabbing this and that, when the guy that you are hoisting up says much worse than that? And I went, even as a result of that, I went and looked up the lyrics of his top 5 songs, and they're all terrible. There's nothing good in there. You could say, if you listen to Tupac, for example, back in the days, that he told stories and he rapped about some profound stuff, despite rapping about some bad stuff too. There was some good in there, and I just didn't even see a hint of that. Yeah.
And so for us as social workers to be highlighting this person who does not represent social work, especially revolutionary social work, in any way, it doesn't make sense to us.
It's just celebrity culture.
Yeah.
And then to take it further, I mean, I have a lot of issues with the way that the NASW posts on social media. And then the other issue, which is much deeper, I would say, is that they come across in their especially things that have anything to do with politics, they come across as just in arms of the Democrats, of the DNC. And we've been playing this game for a long time that Trump is really bad, and so we have to save the world. We have to save democracy. And we've been playing that for a long time, at least 8 years now, since pretty much our whole relationship. That's been the game. And I really bought into that the first election. And the first election versus Trump versus Hillary. And I didn't like Hillary Clinton either, but I really didn't like Trump. And I'm not saying I like him now. What I'm saying is that you can't keep playing the boogeyman role of Trump is bad forever, and then we take whatever else we get because at least it's better than that. And so I saw that the first time it happened, I think, was the last election with Biden versus Trump. They endorsed Joe Biden. Okay, so whatever. I don't want to go back. That's in the past, and I don't have too much context on that. But here we are 4 years later, and they endorsed Biden again, despite that he obviously wasn't fit to be in office. And then when he dropped out, they endorsed Kamala Harris. But Kamala Harris hasn't done any interviews. She has since after they endorsed. She's laid out a few policy decisions and things like that. I did a poll on LinkedIn, and it didn't get tons of responses, and it was mixed a little bit. But the majority, which I knew what would be the answer, the majority for the biggest concern for social workers to live, I can remember exactly what we asked. That was the barrier to their success. Was economic issues, and under the Biden administration, it's been terrible, and people are struggling. And so, why would we endorse that as social workers, profession that is known for being unpaid? It's the first conversation that everyone always has. We ain't going to get paid nothing as a social worker, which I think is a little bit untrue. But there are plenty of jobs within social work where you don't get paid shit for how much work you do and how hard you work and all you give into the job. And so economics should be a priority. And I'm not saying people should embrace Donald Trump. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that if you're going to endorse someone, you ought to hold them a little more accountable for what you're endorsing them for and what are they doing, and not just saying they're better than the boogeyman. Just
because they're on one side and not the other. And that, again, just goes to the division as well. Like, if we just go down party lines and just stay in this divisive two-party system, right, and not actually dialogue on the actual issues that are concerning us, we're just making a blind endorsement for no actual reason.
Well, I think it goes back to the conversation we had earlier about when we were talking about race and whatnot. And so like the Democrats would say they value diversity, right? Like that would be a thing, especially versus Republicans, if you were pointing at the two, right? Democrats are going to value diversity. Republicans have more diversity than they used to, but still it's not even close. Like if you look at who's in office as far as racial, ethnic diversity, things like that, it's not even close. Okay? And but let's look at the NASW. They have, I can't remember what they're called, but they have some committee or some group, some board that determines their political endorsements. If they have a political board, right? Well, I read that they voted unanimously both times to endorse Biden and then to endorse Harris. So let me ask you something. if the room around the table is diverse, like meaning that black, white, brown, just whatever how we're perceiving people, right? Different cultures. But they all have the exact same values and they all believe the exact same things. Is there really diversity in that boardroom, or does that actually point to a lack of diversity?
Right. Where's the diversity of thought?
And I've had multiple students just in the last couple of years come to me without any, like solicitation or anything like that, and say to me, Professor, I feel like I can't say anything in class because it's just assumed what my political beliefs are or what I agree with and don't agree with. I've had several black men come and tell me that. And so I guess...
In other classes, right? That they can't express themselves in other classes.
Well, and just in general, in social work, they can't express them, or in education as well, they can't express themselves in these ways. And I think we're missing the mark.
Yeah, we are. And I think we don't have enough dialogue on it. Like just this sort of dialogue. And if we were able to in future have more people to converse with and talk about these things, we would see a diversity of thought. And yeah, it's wild, the climate that we're in right now. And I think just to talk to evolution again, our thoughts constantly evolve, right? But we have to put ourselves out there to take in new perspectives and to be open and adapt, just like revolutionary social work, how we explained in that description, the definition is all about. We have to be open to different things. And 4 years ago, we may have thought one thing, and it's okay to evolve. It's okay to think differently and to think outside of the box. And I think people hopefully will find that through this podcast.
Mm-hmm. And I think, sticking with on the subject, social work values, or what you should value as social work. And it should obviously be like, self-actualization for folks and health and things like that, right? And so it presents a huge contradictions in the way that the value system should work for what used to be, or what is, I don't know what you say, like the left or liberals or whatnot, because those were the people that valued health and things like that. But as we know, which we should get in much deeper in a different podcast, like for example, the food companies are literally poisoning.
Don't get me started.
Poisoning you, poisoning me, poisoning us, and they make it very hard to avoid those things. Well, politically, the only person I hear talking about those things is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And I'm not saying I agree with everything he says or anything like that, but on this subject, he is the only person in politics that is talking about it. And now he joined forces with Trump, which seems weird because I view Trump as this super unhealthy person eating McDonald's all day, every day. And so it's a contradiction in a way. But what's also a contradiction is that I don't hear I probably shouldn't say it because there probably is somebody kind of talking about it on the left. But on the Democrats, you don't hear those things. And I would guess that many of the people that own and invest in those companies that are poisoning you are Democrats.
Follow the money. Follow the money.
And then the last thing I feel like we have to mention on here, also as social workers, revolutionary social workers, but endorsing both candidates, Biden and Harris, they have continued to arm Israel and Ukraine, but I mean just flooding the world with weapons, spending money. They send billions and billions of dollars that they spend on weapons, which they print more money, which causes inflation, which makes you, me, and everybody else more poor, materially anyways, than we were beforehand. And so I don't know, we don't have time to go into all the depths of what's happening with Israel and Gaza. What I will say is I know enough to know that it's not okay, or in any way, shape, or form, the level of warfare, brutality, whatever you want to call it, that's happening in Israel to people that have nothing to, in Gaza, that have nothing to do with what happened last October. Yep. And without getting too much into that, but why would the National Organization of Social Workers, why would they endorse candidates that are flooding the world with weapons? we are literally the violence. We are funding it. They're taking your taxpayers that you do in your social work job, and they fund weapons, weapons, and weapons, and weapons, and the politicians are invested in it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Why isn't that a condition for an endorsement?
Right.
Some peace, basically. We call it all different kinds of things, ceasefires and truces and all these things. How about, why isn't peace a condition? We are going to work towards ultimate peace, because the Democrats are not going to do that.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
And one point I did want to make earlier is that with economics, is that the economic situation in America was also really good during the previous Democratic president, Obama, into the Trump candidate. So it's not like Trump made everything perfect.
Yeah.
The economy was very good when Obama was doing it. I have a lot of problems with Obama, but it was good at that time. And it's not now. It's terrible. And so there's obviously differences. And as far as I know, we weren't sending quite so much money overseas at that time.
Yeah. I'm not sure about that. But yeah.
Either way, I think that the NASW has a higher responsibility to embrace diversity at a real level, not just on a level of illusion to which we can look at the room and perceive it as diverse when everybody has the same ideas.
Yeah.
And there's no diversity or no pushback on something. They're really in any kind of organization like that, for a national organization of social workers that come from many different types, places, creeds, religions, cultures, belief systems, everything. How could there ever be a whole group of people that would unanimously embrace the same?
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense. That means there's no diversity.
Yeah. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't. And I think the point of bringing this up, one point of bringing this up, is really, as social workers, we need to use our critical thinking and continue having dialogue on these sort of things. Because if we just blindly follow this whole sentiment of just endorsing a candidate just because they're part of the Democratic Party, the field is not in a good place to do that. We're just not in a good place. And so for revolutionary social work, to be revolutionary social workers, we have to think critically, and we have to not be afraid to be the one that stands up and says something different, and to start the conversation.
And those things that we think we're so right about, that we think that we can't be wrong, those are the things we're often, at least when I look back at myself, that we change on and that we're wrong about. And so we should always be willing to look inward and change our perspective and evolve our perspective. If we have the same podcast in a year from now talking about the same subjects, we'd be pretty lame if we talked about the exact same things in the exact same way. Our values might stay the same for the most part, but even they might shift just a little bit as we figure out and understand the world and ourselves better and adapt to an ever-changing world, right? The world is also changing that we don't have so much control over.
Exactly. And that's just lastly on the circle of self. That's why it's about wholeness. It's not this set kind of system that you have in place. It's an evolution. It's about wholeness in those different areas. But those areas, the way that they become whole can change as you grow. So.
Well, all right. I hear some rumbling in the bedroom over there, and looking at about an hour and 15 minutes. That means the movie's probably just about or has just gotten over for our children. And to respect them and not make them wait for us and all of that, we should wrap things up. What do you think? I
think so. I'm so glad that we were able to sit down and chat this out, and hopefully there'll be many, many more.
All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the first episode of the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast. Episode 2 is already recorded, but we'll be back with episode 3. Recording episode 3 sometime in the near future. Take care, everyone. Peace.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Revolutionary Social Work Podcast, and we just want to say thank you for your continued support. You can catch us on YouTube, Apple Music, and Spotify. Remember to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share our content with the world. But most of all, never forget to keep being revolutionary. Peace.